as we quiet down here together, that we can see clearly. We see the suffering. Those of you who are experienced practitioners, it hasn't gone away. Exactly. We can acknowledge the suffering of kinds around us and in ourselves. But we also know that it's not the end of the story. It's the first noble truth of the Buddha's teaching, that there is suffering in life. Not that life is suffering, but that life has suffering. But there's causes. Causes are clinging, greed, hatred, ignorance, delusion, fear. And they cause individual suffering, but they cause it across the globe. Greed and hatred, we can see this. And then there's an end to it. It's possible through the awakening of this wise heart in you to live with compassion, empathy, understanding, a centeredness, a wisdom. And as you do, as you learn to do this, you become the person that changes the world. You all know this passage from Thich Nhat Hanh where he says, when the crowded Vietnamese refugee boats met with storms or pirates, if everyone panicked, all would be lost. But if even one person on the boat remained centered and calm, it was enough. It showed the way for everyone to survive. So who's that person in the boat of the world? You become that in your work, in your community, in your family. And the last words of the Buddha are, in the last, gesture of his teaching, he said, this world is ephemeral, impermanent, it's always changing. Practice and make of yourself a light. That's the most poetic translation of his words. Become a lamp, a light where you are, which is possible for you. And so the practices that we do together and that some of you have been doing for a lot of years, they allow us somehow to carry that light in the world. Not because we're like special people, because everybody has light. But sometimes it's kind of covered over often or dim. And the tools of these practices, yes, there's mindfulness, but it really starts with virtue. The first of the training is integrity, to deliberately choose to not cause harm, to have a reverence for life and to care or not to kill, to have a reverence for the things that we're entrusted with and to be a steward of them, to not cause harm through the misuse of our speech, through the misuse of sexuality, through the misuse of intoxicants. You all know the basic trainings of inner virtue, not because you're supposed to be a virtuous person, but because it brings happiness. And it brings a sense of well-being to yourself and to others. If you know somebody who speaks the truth and kindly, if you know someone who doesn't steal or kill or, who cares for life, there's a way in which that person makes a field of well-being that you can also experience. And so you learn to refine your attention to not cause harm. There's a practice for us all. And then there's a practice of steadying the mind, of concentrating, as we've done a bit today with the breath and other things, not for its own sake. Okay, now I'm concentrated and have sometimes very beautiful experiences of light and purity and so forth, but rather because as I get quieter and more steady, I can be more patient, I can be more tolerant, I can be more fearless, I can be more generous. All the things that are called the paramitas, the inner beautiful qualities of your own Buddha nature, they manifest because you become more steady in your own self, in your own life. And then as you do, what begins to open more is a trust for the space of loving kindness and loving awareness, the practices we've just done this afternoon. And they help you to tolerate your life, basically, because that's how it goes, You're vulnerable as a human being, and everybody else is too. And it's really mysterious, this life. And people would ask all kinds of questions to my teacher, Ajahn Chah. Can you tell us about enlightenment, or can you tell us how we should practice, or what matters, or philosophical questions or practical questions. And one of his favorite answers was, "Mai na," which means it's uncertain, isn't it? And we'd ask him something and he'd smile and say, "It's uncertain, isn't it?" He didn't give some cookie cutter answer about enlightenment or, "Well, should we do this or that?" And he'd just look at you and say, "It's uncertain, isn't it?" And he wanted us somehow to rest in the mystery that nobody's ever lived your life before, and no one can tell you what you should be doing next. You really have to listen to your own heart and be willing to rest in that mystery. Somerset Maugham said there are 3 rules for writing the great English novel. Unfortunately, no one knows what they are, right? This is our condition as human beings. But what we can do is show up. We can be there for the work we do, the people we care about, the earth that matters, the connections that we have, the things that we're given to steward in our life. We can show up for them. And that becomes our practice. Now, as you show up, it doesn't mean that it's going to be all that much easier. And you can see that as experienced practitioners. Your suffering doesn't exactly go away. In fact, sometimes, you see it more clearly. There's more suffering of certain kinds. You see the suffering of the world, or in your own family, or your own body, or your own loneliness, or, all those things. You're no longer running away from it. But your suffering isn't a mistake, that kind of suffering. That poem from Wendell Berry, where he writes, "It may be that when we no longer know what to do, we've come to our real work. And that when we no longer know which way to go, we've come to our real journey. The mind that is not baffled is not employed. The impeded stream is the one that sings." And there's something really magnificent in that verse, that it's often through the very difficulties, whether it's in our relationships or the community around, or our stewarding of things, or trying to make a difference in the world, that the very difficulties become the place where the heart grows both tender or loving, but also grows true, that there's some way in which we can live with a kind of courage and understanding.